Yes. Is it okay where I'm sitting, or do you want us to move? Is podium better? All right, so Saturday of Notacon, and we're talking about, we titled it Beyond Using the Buddy System because a lot of times when people talk about sexual assault, there's this idea that if you have a friend with you, you're not going to get assaulted. And then there was recently a thing on Facebook that it was written by a police officer, and he said women shouldn't use ponytails because that makes it easy for them to get assaulted. And all kinds of stupid myths. So we'll kind of talk about myths throughout it, but just kind of, there's been a lot of people in the past year or two talking about sexual harassment and some sexual assault, but a lot of harassment at cons in general. So we just kind of wanted to put out there what other cons are doing, policies that they're putting in place, as well as how to deal with it. So the first probably quarter or third is a little boring. It's a lot of stats just to give some background, just to make it a little bit more, not that it's not a serious topic, but give more weight to what we're talking about. So this is who we are. This is our company and our website, which is still in the process of being slowly built and whatnot. All right, so why even talk about it? Which I kind of covered it a little bit, but there's just not a lot of info out there. When you try and look up stats on this, you can't have solid stats. There's a lot of personal anecdotes, which can be very helpful, but you're not really getting the true stats to understand it when we're talking harassment. Sexual assault, we're getting a little bit more, but even then, the percentage of sexual assaults that are never even reported kind of also makes that a little tricky. More and more people are talking about it. It can also alienate people. So when you're looking at cons and you want to make sure that you get a good audience, if people start to know that, hey, this is the one where it's okay to get drunk and grope people, there's going to be a population that's not going to be as wanting to come and hang out. Also can cause issues with other people having a good time. They want to enjoy themselves. And if there's, always a few people that are getting drunk and being weirdos, which is going to happen anywhere, but if they do it in a way that bothers other people, hello. People may be doing it without even realizing it. So sometimes with harassment, there's this fine line between being, and I hate to be sexist and say the creepy guy, but being the creepy guy and hitting on somebody in a polite, appropriate way. And this doesn't mean you have to like pinkies out, be like, well, Froggy, you look rather fine in that yellow shirt today. It's a flattering color. And hey, baby, that ass be sexy. Back it up on me. Thank you. See, he said thank you. So harassment would be if he said, thank you, and I continued, or if he said, you know what, leave me alone, and I said, oh, come on. Don't you like it?
That's not appropriate. Walk away.
I was going to say, you guys have already understood most of this, but
Actually started teaching Alexa to say just that.
and that's appropriate.
That's not appropriate. I don't feel comfortable. Walk away.
So he said, that's not appropriate, I don't feel comfortable, and then walk away. And the key is when you say these sort of things, don't try and be nice about it. I mean, I always, as a girl growing up, had people say to me, like, you need to be nice to people, you need them to like you. Well, in that case, no you don't, screw them. Do what you gotta do. And also, people may not know how to safely intervene. So when we say intervene, we don't mean if somebody is waving around a gun or trying to punch someone else that you should jump in the middle and be Superman. There's ways to safely do it. All right. So then, because I come from a health ed background, we always do goals and whatnot. You guys can kind of read through those. That's just kind of something I tend to always do and be a little bit more on the academia side of my life. But just talking about stuff, giving you guys a little bit more knowledge, as well as how to safely intervene, being able to recognize what some signs may be, and how to ask for consent. Trigger warning, just want to put that up there in case anybody has been assaulted, harassed, or whatnot. Some of the things we may talk about can be triggering or upsetting to you. If it is so, at the end, we have a couple crisis numbers, and we'll be around to talk. All right, so now we have to get into the definition side of things, just so we know what we're talking about. And this can also vary state to state, but in the state of Ohio, because, hey, you know what, that's where we are. This is what we're talking about. So some states are going to use sexual assault and rape interchangeably. It depends on where you're at. So in Ohio, sexual assault is unwanted sexual contact that stops short of rape or attempted rape. This can include sexual touching, fondling, child sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and stalking/cyberstalking. Ohio's still kind of getting with the cyberstalking. We're still better than many states, but not all. Sexual coercion is where you force someone to have sex or sexual acts by means of manipulation or threat. There was recently, within the past few years, at an academic conference in my field where a guy who was on the board, was essentially a lifetime member, had contributed a lot to the field, was found out that he was telling people when they were putting in the proposals for the conference, well, you know, if you take care of me, wink, wink, and that was in an email, I'll make sure your proposal gets seen. I'd have to ask her to send me it, but I know there was a smiley face at the end. And I was like, there's nothing like somebody with a PhD who's, you know, 50 and above with like emoticons going on in their conversation. In their assault conversation, yeah. And my friend responded back initially with, and I know he did it to several people, I'm only speaking from the email I saw, with, I'm a lesbian and in a committed relationship. I hope this is a joke. And his response back was, no one has to know. Exactly, fail vote. Just made a fail right there. It continued on for a few emails, and then after the conference, she ended up not having any workshops approved. I don't know if that was related. She brought it to one of, there was two co-chairs. She brought it to one of them, and he said, I'm sure he was joking. It was just a joke. Don't take it so seriously. And she was very offended. And she went to one of the other chairs the week following, and they were really bothered. The guy was stripped of all of his titles. He will never hold a title in the organization again. He will never be able to join the organization. And word travels fast. My field's pretty small, so a lot of people in the field know who that is. And I mean, that's a huge black mark. And at first, maybe he was joking, but that's not the way to go about it. As soon as she was like, hey, dude, really? That's when you drop it, apologize, move on. So in Ohio, rape is actually, and this is the Ohio legal definition, for sexual intercourse, including vaginal, anal, or oral penetration. Penetration can be by a body part or an object, and that's actually different from a lot of other states, which, as somebody that's been in the sexual assault advocacy field for almost 10 years now, that's actually kind of beneficial when you're looking to prosecute. Some places it has to be penis in vagina, which that's already going to alienate a lot of people. Intimate partner violence, which in a lot of the slides I shortened to IPV, is any violent act between current or former partners. It can be verbal abuse, hitting, pushing, stalking, cyberstalking. And then the last one is sexual harassment, and that's bullying or coercion of a sexual nature or the unwelcome, inappropriate promise of rewards in exchange for sexual favors. And I just used the Wikipedia basic, you know, get it done definition. So this, for me, was exciting, not in the happy sense. We have a new definition of rape. This was in October 2011. Yes. The FBI definition was unchanged since 1929. So that was federal. They used to say it was the carnal knowledge of a female forcibly and against her will. Basically, the FBI said men cannot be raped. Only females can be raped. And for a while, they did use that as the, you know, sexual versus gender. So even people that were trans were kind of excluded. So the new definition, October 19th, 2011, and there was a lot of buzz in, you know, the sex ed field when this came out. We didn't know for sure what it was going to be until October, and it was penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ or of another person without the consent of the victim. And not that anybody has to raise their hands in this huge room, but who in here has ever done anything sexual while under the influence of anything? Alcohol, medication, whatever. Like, I'll go for it. We have 2 people at least raising their hands. I did. So in Ohio, legally, you can't consent if you are under the influence of anything. Which I worked a few interesting cases where both people were under the influence. Legally, any bit, you can't consent. So that's always something to keep in mind, especially you're at a con, you're having a good time, it's a party atmosphere. I'm not saying don't enjoy yourself.
If you're drinking and they're drinking, and you both are consenting, and not just the legal definition of Ohio, but in the general sense that you're both consenting, then what is it?
If you're both consenting,
So what I'm saying is you're both consenting in reality, not Ohio law. But Ohio law is if you're both been drinking, you're not technically consenting. So who made who?
is anybody saying that they were raped, or were they both like, we just had sex?
No one's saying they are. Both just consider consensual sex. But both were drunk. One is not consenting one another.
Whoever goes to the police first. So the question, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if both people are drinking and they both have sex consensually, it's gray territory. As long as nobody says it was not consensual, Ohio kind of ignores it. And the under the influence law varies in a lot of states. Some states will say alcohol, some will say drugs, some will say it doesn't matter. Some you have to say no, or perceived notion of no consent. So I've worked cases where both people were drunk and then 2 weeks later somebody says no. It gets tricky. That's where you get in this really tricky.
Passed out drunk, obviously it's rape, and those old people are tipsy as hell, and they,
Yeah, and I fully agree that he says there's a difference between being passed out drunk or barely coherent and tipsy. Yeah, and that's where it does get tricky because you do have people that have had a drink in them, and legally in Ohio you can drive. So if you can drive, now you can't consent to sex all of a sudden.
Well, and the law is law, but in practicality, enforcement and prosecution of sexual assault is garbage. I mean, it's very poor. So, unless somebody comes forward and saying I was assaulted, they barely prosecute the ones that do come forward. So there's obviously nobody chasing down 2 tipsy people having sex. It's just doesn't happen.
Nationwide, 15 out of 16 people, and this is estimated, that have raped somebody never spend a single day in jail. So that's my sad, sobering statistic. Now you know why this is the uplifting hour. All right, so this I literally just pulled because there was no way for me to easily condense it, and I pulled a lot out. Usually when we talk sexual harassment, a lot of people think in the workplace. So obviously at work, you don't want your boss to smack your ass and say, hey, baby, how about you get that file on my desk? We're not talking the movie Secretary. But sexual harassment can occur in all places. However, the laws don't cover it as easily when you're out of work. So unwelcome sexual remarks, jokes, or taunting. And the key is unwelcome. There's a difference between you make some jokes, everybody's enjoying themselves. You're playing maybe Cards Against Humanity, and we know there's going to be sexual cards. Repeated requests for dates. This problem happened at the World Atheist Con, where a woman was in the elevator. She was one of the guests of honor, and another guest said, hey, I'd really like to get coffee with you. And there's a huge difference between, hey, baby, I'd like to get coffee with you. And he says, no. And the woman repeatedly said no, and he said, come on, just get a coffee in my room. Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between let's get a cup of coffee, no thanks. He continues to ask, and it's in his room. Yeah, exactly. Let me show you my coffee maker. 2 creams, a roofie, and a sugar. Well, actually, roofies are harder to get, so maybe they would use something else. But, yeah, no, it's... At that point, that's where it gets into tricky territory. And she blasted the guy, put his name out there. And that's also where I think it gets tricky. She ended up being okay. Blasting the guy and putting him out there, like I said, it's tricky. Do you want to read them?
Sure. Let's go through these here real quick. Sorry. I'm going to skip around because there's a lot here, and you folks can read. But unwanted sexual remarks, jokes, taunting. The repeated, we're moving on down. Demands, requests for sexual favors. So this one's unnecessary touching, grabbing, petting, pinching, following or silently observing someone, which is leering, staring, these kind of things. Obviously sexual assault, forced kissing, forced contact. There's your examples.
There was, and some of these cons I don't want to name because I'm not trying to like drag them through the mud and say harassment happens there. A lot of these places have now come out and made very firm policies. One of them, there was a guy where he was, and a lot of this, you're at a con, especially if you're one where there's a lot of people, you're in a busy room. He was sitting next to a person and slowly started kind of getting on her territory. And she said, please just don't touch me. And I know her, she's not a touchy-feely person. At this point, he then did this to her. I really like your hair. She starts like wigging out, actually stood up and left. And he started doing this to other people. He had people that he was in an elevator with them and start to, you kind of do this. And once you're arm to arm with somebody, unless they really hate you, they're going to, I mean, how many people, if you rub shoulders with them, are they like, get away, sicko? I mean, it happens. So I personally believe, based on all the experiences I've read at that situation, that this guy started kind of doing that. People didn't push him away. He continued to do it. He was in a room during a panel, and he started stroking this woman's thigh. She was literally pushing him away. The speaker walked over and said, "Can you stop doing that? She looks freaked out." And this guy continued the whole weekend doing that. They said they're going to stop him from ever coming back because they tried to email and talk with him, the people in charge of this con, and Froggy said kick his ass out, calls to kick. Exactly. I mean, as soon as this stuff happens, just get on it. Do not give them a pass and say, gee whiz, I'm sure he's a really nice guy. Okay, sure, maybe he is. But, so, again, these are just some basic stats that you guys can kind of read through, but in general, especially going back to the title of the workshop, moving beyond the idea that the rapist is always a black dude in a dark alley. I can't tell you how many cases I've worked where I'm sitting in the room with somebody that's been assaulted, and not to give a bad name to police officers, because there's many good ones, but when the officer comes in and goes, so they were black, huh? Yeah, and I think in like 10 years there's been one or two. Usually they're white dudes. Sorry. Sorry about that, guys. But, and they usually knew the person. This is not usually a stranger. It may be former partner, current partner, but it's usually somebody that if you ask them what's their first name, they can usually do it. Almost always you're going to get a last name too, address, Facebook friend we've used, somebody that they knew. And it's considered one of the most underreported crimes. A lot of people don't report, and for all kinds of reasons. I'm never going to tell somebody that they should report it. They have to report it. People don't report it. There's retaliation, all kinds of issues surrounding that. And the Supreme Court labeled it to be a non-economic violent crime, but if you look at the cost of just sexual assault on its own, there's the price of how much it averages the survivor. Oh, I think I have way less college loans than that. $94,000, because you're including counseling, time off work, maybe court costs, because I know with my people, when I meet with, because I do court advocacy as well, if I meet them at court, they have to pay to park. Nobody covers that. State of Ohio maybe pays you back if you file and you wait about 8 months. Again, stats, Ohio, so I'm going to be a little loyal here, but approximately a quarter of women have been victims of intimate partner violence, and these are reported. So think of 4 chicks, you know, one of them has reported intimate partner violence at some point in her life. And as somebody that tried to report that to the police, they tried telling me, no, it's probably not that bad. I had a close friend of that person say, if it was that bad, you would have left sooner. Which, that's supportive. I don't mean to laugh because it is serious. But, so 51%, so it's not just men against women. 51% of women said that they'd used physical aggression in a relationship. And that doesn't mean they punched them. They might have pushed them a little. which doesn't make it any better, but so it's not just guys doing this. And 77% said that they had been victims themselves. So it tends to sometimes be this cycle. People that have been in homes with intimate partner violence are more likely to either be perpetrators of it or be in those relationships themselves. They're also less likely to speak out if they see it happen. So if somebody had been raised in a home where that happened and they saw harassment at a con, they may not say anything about it. And approximately half of women reported using it with current or former. So, and those were 2 different ones, same author but 2 different people. Again, lots of info, but effects of sexual assault, and it's harder to find info on harassment. So I have to assume some of this goes along with harassment, but I mean, you have to look at, they're more likely to be diagnosed with arthritis, smoke cigarettes, and the smoke cigarettes, the alcohol, that sort of thing may just be a coping mechanism. Lowered immune system, and I'm kind of skipping through, but 3 times more likely to suffer from depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's been studies where people that dealt with workplace sexual harassment had PTSD, which is pretty serious. 13 times more likely to abuse alcohol, 26 times more likely to abuse drugs, and 4 times more likely to contemplate suicide. Here's just some I found on sexual harassment, and a lot of it, again, was workplace, so some had to do with, like, not showing up to work as much. Well, obviously, if somebody at work is harassing you, you're not going to have perfect attendance. But sexual harassment, even if it's happening on your own time, loss of pay. Maybe you oversleep in the mornings because you were up all night thinking about it. So less pay, legal and consultant costs if you decide to sue, lower productivity, you're just going to have lowered self-esteem. Embarrassment, because sometimes people are embarrassed, especially if they report it. They think, oh, I actually had a friend that dealt with being harassed at a con, and she said, I feel like I should have been flattered, and that's why she didn't report it. And I was like, well, there's a fine line between you look lovely today and the guy pushed her up against a wall and was trying to stroke her breasts. Like, and I'm sure he said nice things first, but when she's going like this, and it was security that pulled him away, he was not kicked out. Another place where they just said, you should go back to your room for the night. But a lot of times people say, well, we didn't want to infringe on their enjoyment of the con. And again, I hate to do the rape thing, but less info on the other stuff. It's usually not their only crime. Most people that are rapists won't describe themselves as rapists. If you ask somebody, have you committed rape? And they'll say no. However, if you ask them questions like, have you ever forced somebody to have sex when they didn't want to? They'll say yes. They also tend to do other crimes, because I've heard people say, well, gee, they didn't really mean to, it was a mistake. Well, they're usually not the angels of society here. So, for the longest time, this is what I was taught. To reduce your risk of harassment, of sexual assault, you need to think about being prepared, looking ahead of time, wearing the right outfit, being alert, watching for signs of trouble, trust your gut, which I'm going to say always trust your gut, but being assertive. But is that all we need? Like, as long as I'm prepared and I'm assertive, I'm good to go? If you're assertive with a taser, that's pretty good. Maybe I'll take that back, add that in there, but I say no. I say we need a little bit more than that. So again, moving on to, we're still in kind of the logging through all this. You want to go?
Sure. So myths, myths regarding rape. It's a crime of passion. We know that's a myth. Yeah, I think so. That women or survivors asked for it. That the stranger rape myth, that rape is from strangers, people jumping out of an alley, that kind of nonsense. That women could avoid rape if they really didn't want it. That it's sort of like you must have really wanted it, if that sort of thing. The rapists are crazy or psychotic, and while that may be true for some, it's not always the rapists are a different race than their victims. Men can't control their sexual desires, and so that they just have no choice but to rape. And that rape is no big deal, and that men cannot be raped, which, as we know, is
and I pulled those from another workshop I did 2 years ago, and I just had people say myths, and I was like, now we understand if you guys say these aren't necessarily truths, and nobody hold those as truth. But it's very important to at least discuss what some of these myths are, and that they are not true. It's absolutely not true that women cry rape as revenge. Well, this does happen. The statistics held true for the past, I want to say 12 years now, 13 years. It's less than 5% of women. Does this happen? Yes. Is there sometimes a miscommunication? Yes. However, if somebody cries out rape, at least try to figure out, support them. And then if they're saying it and you're like, gosh, I really don't know if this story's adding up, try to support them because there's probably at least something else going on in their life. So why talking about myths is important? The thing there is when we take them as truth, it's another way to take the voice away from the survivors. It can lead people to not report. I have a lot of people I talk to that say, well, I didn't report because I knew no one would believe me. I knew no one would believe my spouse, my ex, if it's a woman, you know, my lesbian lover. A lot of guys that have been assaulted will say, people are never going to believe I was raped. And at the end of the day, and again, why the trigger warning is here, sex is friction. I have a lot of people that will say, why did my body respond? And they're very upset by this. Well, because sex is friction. Your body sometimes responds even when your mind doesn't want it to. So what myths have you guys heard about either harassment, assault, any of this? Yeah, dressing provocatively means consent. And that's why a lot of the slut walks have been going on. I could show up in front of a long-term partner dressed in the best, sexiest lingerie in the whole wide world, start to have sex with them, give them amazing oral sex, and in the middle of it say, you know what, I'm done. And just because I dressed sexy, started having sex, doesn't mean that I consented it. I can take back my consent at any time. But yeah, there's this idea that, and I hate to use my former experiences as a bartender, but there was always the idea that she shows up at the bar, she's having drinks, she's on a date, she dressed sexy, she knew what would happen. Come on in. We have more people that are either looking for the ferret we were squeaking for or are intrigued by the myths. Something or someone. Okay. So any other myths that we have heard about, either harassment or assault?
That's a good one.
Yeah, because that's one I hear a lot. And, of course, this will show my age, but like 20 years ago, Tori Amos, in one of her songs, the line is, just because I wore a slinky red thing, does that mean that I should spread? And this guy said, I'd really love to sign you. How about you come over to my house and play some music? And she wore a very attractive dress, and he assaulted her. And he later said, well, you came to my house, you dressed that way, what did you think would happen? And there's projects out there where a woman took photos of people wearing the outfits they wore when they were assaulted, and that for me is very eye-opening. I mean, there's a lot of people just in regular, everyday clothes. It's a power thing. It has, in rare occurrences, does it have to do with sex, but it's mostly power. Power, control, sometimes hatred and aggression. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have much to do with sexy. I have worked with people over the age of 80 that were assaulted. And, well, yes, we can get into the whole, like, kink fetish thing for that. Like, give me a break. Think of your grandma. Like...
No. No.
Well, mine is 6 feet under, so, no. So anything about harassment, myths you've heard, or even just ideas? Or you guys are just so happy thus far in the talk. Yeah. So what is consent? We actually have a few slides on that coming up. You're already like, let's get over the downer stuff and get to consent. And that's actually a good question about if you have a long-term partner, do you consent? And some people, they do every time. Once, in my opinion, and this is not academic at all, but once you're with a partner, you get to learn their signs. You start to know when they're kind of tired and when they're kind of like, I'm not that into it. And you also know when your partner is usually very enthusiastically, yes, 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 let's do it, baby.
I think there's also really degrees of consent. You're on first date with somebody and sure maybe you consent to fondling or like petting. That doesn't mean that, okay, you start ripping their clothes off and go away.
Yeah, so you said that on the there's levels of consent. First date, maybe you consent to, and some people first date, you have sex. It can also be situational. So some people first date, you start with some kissing, some light petting, maybe their hand starts to travel down your pants and you're like, you know what, this is where I draw the line today. So a lot of times, behaviors are actually on a continuum. The world isn't black and white. It's not like today I ate unhealthy or healthy. Some days it's in the middle, although some days it is unhealthy. But they just kind of fall on this line. So think of when we talk about like the next few slides, talking about like sexual harassment, physical behaviors, is it completely safe or dangerous, or do nothing or call the police? Just because you see somebody grab another person's ass, does that mean you call the police and have them arrested and kicked out of America? Or do you do nothing? Which ideally you don't do nothing. You do something. And it's just like in a relationship, is it healthy to have sex when you kind of don't want to, you're not really sure? Is that rape? It may not be full-fledged, yeah, let's do it, consent, this is the best ever. And for some people, once they start, then they get into it. So just, again, thinking of all the continuums with just some general physical behaviors of harassment. I mean, hanging around a person, is that completely dangerous? And a lot of it's situational. I mean, things that are going to be acceptable at this con are going to be different at another con. If you go to, I know there's a leather con this same weekend, so people there are going to be going around dressed a little bit more scantily clad. There are going to be people carrying a paddle and might, you know, maybe somebody's wearing a necklace that says slave and the other person starts spanking their ass. Is that going to be acceptable in an open area here? No, because this is also like there's kids running around, there's family. You consider that kind of stuff when you think about which behaviors are okay and are not. As well as, you know, how people dress doesn't mean it's rape, but also how people dress can fall into like acceptable ways of dressing at a con. There's nobody that's going to be running around in an open area here in pasties. There's some cons that I've been to where they'll have signs up of like clothing optional areas, and then like, I don't know how they word it, but like your private no-nos have to be covered areas of the con. And so people will usually bring like robes or like a quick hoodie and easy to slip on sweatpants, and that's what they wear in the common areas. And again, that's going to vary. That sounds what? They air it out very well, and there's a lot of fans going. So just grabbing, squeezing, pinching. Also depends, like, do they know this person? Do they, when they're grabbing their ass, is the person kind of smiling at them, looking at them, or are they starting to kind of move away? Do you want to go through any of them?
Sure. Let's skip around a little bit, but, I mean, obviously, different examples are, and in different situations, it's all situational is what I'm getting at here. There's hugging, kissing, patting on the head, stroking. There's, yeah, that's nice. Massages. Okay, so, I mean, this one I think comes up quite a bit, actually, is sometimes a neck massage is just a neck massage and it's a friendly thing or whatever, and then sometimes it gets into the, like, I would prefer you not touch me, and it continues. That's when you get into trouble down that continuum. So hanging around a person, that's another one where it's a gray area. If you're standing around in a group and there's a bunch of people hanging around you, how can you really say no? But that guy's being the creeper. But maybe persistently following them from group to group, there's that one person, and then it gets more of a nuisance and unwelcome. And obviously the things like blocking a person's path to prevent them from getting out of a situation where they feel uncomfortable. So there's some examples of physical behaviors that are on that continuum of verbal. There's the sort of stereotypical cat calls, walking by the construction site or whatever. I don't know why it's always got to be construction workers, but asking.
It's a stereotype. It's very true.
It's a stereotype, and while it is, I've seen it happen. It's not all construction workers are constantly going to, see an attractive person and be like, "Hey, baby." Although I've often seen it happen where in stereotypes, woman ignores it, and then they'll be like, "Yeah, I wasn't interested in you, bitch."
Yeah.
Grew up on construction. Yeah. Female runners get it a ton. I remember in high school running, and we ran for soccer, and there was times that people would catcall the high school girls. Yeah, if she's on a major road, people are screaming something. And obviously some of the conferences and cons I go to are a little bit more sexual in nature. I was at one that was American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. Our badges were pretty obvious. Our con was sandwiched between wood flooring convention and postal service. And related to the next one about asking about somebody's sexual preferences and history, I was in the elevator with one of my professors at the time. And this guy gets in there from the wood flooring, and he'd had a few drinks, and he's like, "So what are you ladies here for?" And my standard answer is, "Oh, we're health teachers." It's the safe answer. And he's like, "Sex on your tag, huh?" And he literally starts grinding up against my leg, and this is 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and starts asking about my sexual history. Have you ever been with a blah, blah, blah guy, a guy who does this? And I not that I was young, I was just blown away. Walking through their party area was like the meat market. I mean, it felt like walking through a construction site. Our people, you'd think the sex educators, we'd all be like orgies. We were all like, "Dude, let's have some hot tea and chill and talk about the talks we had earlier." And I know there was people hooking up, but it was a lot more quiet and polite. We do the consent thing. But the wood floor guys were a little, there was a ton of hardwood floor jokes. And I mean, that was the thing, is it's so hard to be in an elevator with them. And there was a few that I did joke around with, and it was the friendly kind of joking, where I was like, "Hey, how's your hardwood? Do you want to come to our sex talk?" It was a good time. Those people. But, I'll let you continue with yours.
Oh, sorry. So I just want to highlight a few of these. We talked about that one, so we'll check that off. But sexual comments about a person's clothing, anatomy, looks, telling jokes and off-color stories, which I think happens a lot. I know it happens a lot in my workplace, and there's always a fine line of when it goes too far, and you're making people uncomfortable. And I'm sure it happens in just about every setting. We probably, when we get a little further on, we'll talk about ways it could be gently handled. Be like, ease that back a bit, Funny is funny. Now you've insulted people. And one thing that I think this is maybe a little more applicable to workplaces and stuff, but concentrating on somebody's appearance and their sexuality rather than their accomplishments, and that's probably happens more often in professional settings. But
I just wanted to, and I only read this on the way here. One of my friends posted on Facebook, "I shouldn't have to lie about having a boyfriend or being a lesbian avoid being hit on by creepy dudes. And she's at like a gaming convention this weekend. She's bisexual, heavily lesbian, but she's bisexual, and just people's comments back are how many people have experienced this. And it was because the first time it happened, which was last night, the guy hit on her and she basically said, "No thanks." And he continued, "Well, come on, blah, blah, blah." And that's when she said, "You know what, I'm a lesbian. And to be fair, one of my best friends is a lesbian." That doesn't always work. I feel like sometimes it makes people almost try harder. And somebody said, "Hey, maybe it's an open relationship," is her response. And she had to respond back to that. Another person on here, and I asked them all, can I share this? And I'm keeping it, unless you read my whole friends list, you're not going to find it. Creepy dudes don't usually respect a woman's right to her space and her body as much as they respect another man's supposed right to her body. That bloody sucks so much. And then you can come with me to find your inner creeper magnets and have them surgically removed. I found that those guys really don't like taking any action to protect your person. And let's see, are there a few more? You know, some people saying, "Hey, I can tell them to fuck off for you." But it's pretty bullshit the way things are, and this is a guy. It's so disrespectful and just downright insulting that they operate that way. I rarely experience it firsthand, but I can understand why it sucks. And somebody says, "Hey, one of my students from tutorial hit on me and is still at it and won't stop."
So I think we're on our next. No, quick.
Oh, we can be.
So nonverbal behaviors, just to kind of cruise through a little bit of this here. So there's like leering. Some of this is almost kind of comical. I kind of picture like Eddie Murphy movies from the 80s where the lady's like, you know, the whole like facial gestures.
I think Jim Carrey in The Mask when he like does the whistle.
The like, you know, throwing kisses and licking lips. I don't think I've ever actually seen any of this in person. That
I have
right there, or like
I've seen it where the guy will do, and it's. I hate to say it's only a guy that's done this to me, but I've seen the guy do one of these. Like I'm trying to do it at the camera, like.
Oh God.
Now I do it weird, but like the guy did it, and it like literally I didn't mean to, but I actually shuddered. He kind of, I can't do it without looking like a creeper. But, and he, not that he looked sexy, but he kind of like looked at me, made eye contact, winked, and then went. When he did it, he didn't, and I think he left drool. So I was like, this is when I was bartending, and I was like, no. So he said there was the timers on the machines, and an attractive woman, you could tell where she was in the plant by the production times because they would lag more when she walked past because that was all the people turning to look.
Yeah. So we went through some of this. Obviously, obscene gestures. I don't think we need to demonstrate those unless you're... And
Jody's
exactly,
doing one of these. I've also seen, and these I've only seen in a joking way, but I've seen, or like,
what?
I've only seen those. My cans of soup are wide. It's all about girth.
And obviously, touching, rubbing oneself sexually is a no-no. Just, I know you needed to be told that, but...
bartending once, or more than once, I had to tell people to put it away. Like, they weren't just rubbing, they were tugging. After 7 p.m., you had to be 25 or older, but still. Yeah, and trust me, they were tiny mouses. And this I just kind of found of questions to ask yourself, like, if you are concerned if you could be harassing someone.
Are you wondering about your behavior and where it lies on that continuum? Ask yourself, would you want it reported on the news? Do you want, Is there equal power in the interaction? Is there equal initiation and participation between the people in the interaction? Would you exhibit this behavior if your spouse knew about it? Would you want someone to act the way toward your spouse as someone as as you are acting towards someone? I screwed that one up. But
You're good.
Carrying along now.
And these are some case studies you found.
Yeah, we found some actual some stories. So it turns out people are talking about this quite a bit now about specifically sexual harassment and assault at cons. So found some stories. This one was at Linux Fest near the end of a party. A man made unintended sexual advances, tried to force her to put her hand on his crotch. Yeah. She hurried off, told the organizers, essentially, what happened was bystanders were not made aware of the first incident at the time, but reacted with demands that he leave immediately and go to bed. Upon the second incident's occurrence, he left when the second woman went to bed, following her until she reached an area where more people were. There's more to this story, but I think kind of the point was to ask what was done and what was done and what could have been done better. Why was there a delay between Friday night and somebody actually taking action to shut this guy down Sunday morning? Meanwhile, that person that had been assaulted spent an entire weekend knowing that this guy was still there and just hanging out. That has to have ruined her time.
As a direct result of this incident, Ohio Linux Con has a very good harassment policy, and it involves basically one strike and you're out. You are asked to leave the con. They do have it in the beginning that somebody can come over and be like, hey, buddy, you're starting to be a creeper, but they are not dealing with it at all now. Like, it starts to happen, you're out.
All right. In our second scenario, there was a, and these are all things that were like, there was a post that kind of gave us just brief details about it. I followed them down to where the people had blogged about it was their own experiences. So it was these are first-hand accounts, really. At this one, this was another con. I don't know what food camp really is, but we'll go with it. And the male blogger had groped somebody, and then later on was seen doing it again to somebody who was obviously too inebriated to consent. This went on a few times, and in the end, this one actually resulted in the con organizers building a pretty solid policy to shut that kind of stuff down proactively. If you're in attendance, you agree to abide by the policy, and if you don't, then you're out, you're ejected, and you forfeit any expense that you'd put out. So, situation 3. Now this one is a little more. This one's a little longer, but I'll cut it down. It's also complicated by the fact that it was an employee-employer relationship. But this was a woman who worked in tech field. It was at a conference, actually in Sandusky, Ohio, in 2013. Essentially, she checked in, went down, saw her employer, the man who hired her, at the resort bar. He bought lots of drinks for her and him and the colleagues that were there. And eventually, essentially to fit in and try to, because she's working in a very male-dominated industry, she went along with this, everybody's getting drunk, let's all get drunk. And then they put her on the bar, and somebody talked her into doing body shots. And it turns out it was her employer, which is kind of disgusting. But then while he was doing it, he tried to fondle her and put his hands and penetrated her vagina while she's laying on a bar in a public space. The fallout of this was that the guy actually was fired, but they dismissed him and allowed him to say he left amicably on his own accord, which is not. They swept it under the rug. Her long-term fallout was depression, alcohol abuse. She actually had a DUI. She lost that job. She lost her relationship with her boyfriend. She had the anecdote that she told was that one time the boyfriend actually finally started sleeping on the couch and to avoid accidentally touching her in his sleep because she would have such traumatic PTSD about it. And that obviously just destroyed their relationship. Even with her own parents and stuff, she ended up drifting apart, becoming more withdrawn, depressed. So that's all resultant from inappropriate sexual advances at a con.
And then the one I didn't put up there was there is a well-known male blogger that at 2 separate cons tried to start this essentially boob groping project that I'm not using the exact name, so make it a little harder to find out what I'm talking about, but the backlash on it was pretty huge. And actually, I think I put the links in with consent. Did I? Oh, we're plotting over there already. One of the responses was the backup, the open source Women Back Each Other Up project in Gentleman's Auxiliary, which I have the link to. But he tried to make it, he started by saying, well, I wanted people to wear buttons that said, yes, you can grope me, or no, I can't. And that's how it started, which then I'm actually okay with. But he tried to move beyond that and make it just, a woman will tell you when you start groping them if it's inappropriate. And then he made this whole, woe is me, poor me, I'm a victim, post about how, well, as a result, you just won't see me at these 2 particular cons in the future, which he totally showed up to, but he took a year off. So then there was a bunch of people that responded with, we want to see you, we want you there, we support you, we know you didn't mean it in a harassment way. This same blogger has also written a post that basically said, if you're my female friend, I want to sleep with you, feel free to come up to me at any time, and free pass. Which is kind of creepy to have a friend of yours say, if I am your friend, I've thought about fucking you. Because I sent him a joke response, and he sent me a longer text about that to me. And I was like, I've never thought of you in a sexual way. This is very bizarre. So.
I'm a little confused as to how somebody can say, oh, we understand you didn't mean it to be in a harassment way.
So you're confused how people can say that. Yeah. It's not an excuse to say you didn't mean it in a harassing way. Because
The biggest jerks actually go out to harass.
I think only, yeah, and that's the thing is, I think only the biggest jerks in the world, like you said, go out with the intent of, I'm going to harass and make an awful time and get away with whatever I want. And that's why sometimes I do think there is this fine line with harassment of maybe somebody makes a joke, everybody's having a good time, they make another joke, starts to go a little far, and maybe you just don't realize it. And that's why what bystanders can do. That doesn't mean if somebody makes a joke and it goes a little far and one person's uncomfortable, eject that fucker and never let him back in. Ostracize them from everyone. Maybe somebody should go over and be like, hey, dude.
Well, and I think that's part of it is that, like, definitely somebody should go over and be like, hey, dude, this is beyond our limit now. Or, hey, lady, this is beyond our limit. Just to be inclusive.
Because I do think ladies can sometimes get away with it a little more, which isn't to say it's okay, but when a lady does it, it's like when Sarah Silverman makes a dirty joke, we all think it's funnier because, oh, look, the lady said poop. But, it's the idea that and I hate to be heterosexist, if a lady harasses a dude, well, if the dude says no, why would he say no to a sexy lady? Or, not that it's completely related, all the attractive lady teachers that have been on TV for harassing their high school and junior high school students, and the bloggers I've seen respond with, well, I would never say no to that in junior high. Like, you know what? If it was a dude teacher, you all would be calling for his balls to be removed. Let's be honest.
Does anybody have an image of the park grid that illustrates this?
Go ahead.
So kind of already is things of bystanders can do, and obviously we are not the complete source. There's more things on there, more things people can think of, but encourage bystanders to act. Even by being here, hopefully in the future, even telling somebody, hey, maybe in the future if you see something weird, you could do it. So spreading the word. yourselves acting. Programs that aim to improve the actions can... It's the idea that we don't want to look at all men as potential rapists because that's BS. But the potential to help. We also don't want to look at all women as potential victims because that's not what it is. So encourage cons to create policies. There's a link to one where a lot have, and I'll put it out there that we're more than welcome for Notacon, for any other con in the future, to help you guys make a really good, comprehensive policy. However, it's on you to make sure it's followed through. So it's really important to do. It makes your cons safer. You can also get listed on the backup project and a few other ones as a safe con by doing that, which I think in some ways can boost attendance. And I hate to pick on Notacon, but you guys know, you're male-dominated. And he says sadly. And so times like that, there's times as somebody that's been like a girl gamer and stuff, going to, for example, Marcon and wanting to go game and stuff, and it's all dudes, and I get approached as, not a victim, but as somebody's girlfriend. And there's times I wanted to go play tournaments, and people would look at me and go, oh, are you somebody's girlfriend? And that had been said to me so many times. I would be like, listen, bitches, I'm here to throw down. Like, it's very insulting, and it makes you not want to show up. It makes me not want to do that. It makes me want to hold back. And that's freaking sad. I have a very good friend of mine that is in the engineering field, and she does hacking and whatnot, and she's trans, male to female. And for her to go from working as a male in the field to a female, I don't think she realized the huge difference. And she said, even in 1 year, going from doing a workshop at a con to doing a workshop at a conference, and the difference in how people treated her, the difference in how people responded to her. She had people compliment her on her outfit more than her talk. And the first time that happened, I remember her saying, oh my gosh, I picked the right pants. I'm so glad, because she and I did like virtual shopping because she doesn't live in Ohio. And she continued to say, she got sad throughout the day. I mean, she got really despondent. She said, nobody gives a shit what I'm talking about. So that's just kind of having that policy, and I know I kind of got off topic there, but volunteering at your local con. Whether or not it's an official capacity, just volunteering to bystand, to do something, or even just to be the friendly person. Consider when you would feel comfortable intervening. So this is something that we can't teach you. We can't put up on a slide. You have to decide for yourself. And it can also depend on how you feel that day, your mood, what else is going on in your life. There's certainly times when I'm just having a crap day and I'm not going to fucking intervene short of calling the police or grabbing security on my way to do something else. And that's okay. I'm never going to say you're a bad person. That's just not part of my life or my policy.
Oh, wait, what else? Okay.
We are.
All right.
And then consent's next.
Yeah, we're getting into the...
I know, he left before consent.
The last page is pretty good. Yeah, he even asked about it, and then he bailed. We'll have to give him this sheet. So what else? So you can just ask somebody if they're okay.
If they start to look like they're not, there's nothing wrong with pausing a minute, walking over, and even if you don't know them, being like, hey, are you okay? Or if you don't feel comfortable asking that, if they're sitting there, maybe they're playing a game, they're on their phone, they're drinking a ball, something like, oh, hey, I haven't had that flavor, how is it? Distract them.
Yeah. You can tell the harasser that what they're doing is not appreciated, funny, or okay. And that's, it's not putting it on the person that is being harassed at that point. You can say, I'm offended by what you're saying. I wish you wouldn't say that. Obviously, there's call security. Let the staff know. If the staff doesn't act and there is no security, then you can go to police if you have to. I mean, there you can go up that chain until you get an adequate resolution to what's going on in the immediate situation. And obviously, the last one is call the police. Moving on to consent. We're in the good stuff now.
So, our buttons say consent is sexy, which, when we say consent, is anybody familiar with the Antioch policy that they used to have on consent from Antioch University? Their policy basically said every step of your sexual encounter, you need to get consent. It needs to be a yes. It doesn't need to be a smile. It needs to be a yes. So it's anything from, may I put my arm around you? Yes. To, may I kiss you? Yes. I would really like to put my hand on your breast. Is that okay? Yes. The whole way down the line. And their reported incidence of sexual assault went way down. The reported incidence of campus happiness or quality of life, I forget how they worded it on their story, actually started to go up. And the thing I like about it is it's not this heterosexist policy of like, I'd like to touch your penis in my vagina. It's that. Now, this does not mean going out into the real world, you guys should every step of every way ask for consent. There's a difference between verbally asking each time as well as like personally for yourself taking a pause and checking each part of the way. Does your partner seem to be enjoying themselves? Which is a lot easier if it's somebody you've been with before versus the first time. You can even ask, does this feel good? What would you like me to do? So the Canadian law is actually changed recently to have an affirmative standard, and it means a voluntary, enthusiastic yes. And this was from a blog. I just really liked how it was worded. Yes, I really want to, and thank you for asking. Type of consent, not consent that's implied, not silence. Those Canadians are very polite. They bought me coffee because I'd never had a Tim Hortons, and this crew of people I'd never met took me down the street for a Tim Hortons and then stared at me creepily while I drank it. But they were so polite the whole time, those sweet Canadians. So it's just, with your partner, this doesn't mean if they're silent. Sometimes, it depends on the person. If they're silent, that means that they're just kind of going along with it. Would you rather have your partner be like, ugh, I guess I'll give in and do this. I'm bored. If I do this, I can get back to what else I'm doing. Or like, yes, this feels awesome. Because that partner usually is a lot more fun to be with from personal experience. Also, sobriety, just because of Ohio. Or equal levels of sobriety, making sure you're both on the same page. This does not mean have your friend sign a consent form to say it was all okay. If you aren't sure, ask. If you still aren't sure, ask again. If you say, hey, I'd really like to fuck you later, and your person kind of goes, ask again. Be sure. Any other thoughts? So I am a huge fan as a sex educator of sexual inventory checklists, and I just listed my 2 favorites. There is a crap ton out there. Scarlatine's is very long. It says anything from, yes, I'd really like to, I'm kind of interested, maybe, I'm not so sure, no. Some people do a rating of 1 to 10. That doesn't mean that if you borrowed theirs, you have to do their yes, no, maybe. You can go through it solo. I always say go through it solo on your own, because you may discover things you didn't know you didn't want to try, or you may discover things you do want to try. And that can give you an idea of how to talk about it with your partner. You can also each do them together, lay in bed together, cuddle, and kind of talk about it. Like, hey, I'm kind of interested in behavior, whatever. And it can be something completely out there, or it can be something pretty normal. And I think having the inventory checklist gives you a safer space to kind of talk about it. You can also look at your partners and say, hey, I noticed you said that you were intrigued by doggy style. I mean, it doesn't even have to be anything crazy. What about that position turns you on? And it can be a very technical talk, or it can be like, I would really like to try doggy style because your ass is phenomenal. And your partner might then say, gosh, I feel like my ass is huge, I'm a little uncomfortable, can we do it with the lights down? And now you have a great conversation to start with. It can lead to all kinds of talks. So those are just 2 that if you ever wanted to try, I think are super fun. Kidder Caper's book, Sex is Fun, has one that's a little bit more racy. I usually, when I teach college human sexuality, I hand out at least one of them, and I have them do it in class, and I say, you don't have to take it home. I don't think I've ever had one left in the room, though, so I don't know if people go home and like put it on their fridge for their roommates. I don't know what happens to these things. But it can also lead you to talking about, with consent, birth control. If you want to get into all that safety talk, we can do that later. And again, it just gives you ideas. It doesn't have to be super technical. I have a friend that is also a sex educator, and her sexy talk is very technical. And I know in the moment she's mentioned like, oh baby, man, I love your corpus cavernosa. It's so filled right now. And I'm like, dude, really? And her partner's a construction worker, so I'm not really sure how this is working out, but when you ask for consent, it doesn't always have to be technical. Just, I'd like to do something sexual with you can work without saying it that way, but I want to feel close to you. I want to rub up against I would really feel great if I could come in some manner tonight. What can you do to help me with that, baby? That works. Not everybody's verbal. Not everybody's going to feel comfortable, even if it's a long-term partner. Some things are just very difficult. I mean, come on, how many people in here took a class on communication and how to talk to your partner when you were in school? Oh, good, because I've never heard of it being taught anywhere, and I was just waiting for it to happen. So we don't really go over that. We don't really go over how to communicate very well. When we do have communication classes, they're in college, and they're more about like how to communicate to a group of people. I teach about this. I say this stuff all day. You can get me drunk and give me 30 seconds to write down male and female anatomy. I can do that. Some of this stuff can be awkward when you're dating, even long term. So if you're not sure, text. Text your partner.
My mental image of two people laying in bed texting, so.
I think that's pretty common, because I remember dating somebody and sitting across the room from them and being on ICQ, like.
Well, yeah.
And that can be fun, I think. Like for me, in my head, that's my idea of foreplay, is like when there's other people around, you can have this really sexy conversation. And you know that there's people around while you're having this like naughty thoughts, like, ooh, I'm so secret. Go.
Oh. I don't know, are we moving?
With social media, I mean, you could also even, like, if you see something that looks sexy, put it on Facebook, and maybe your partner will see it, or your potential partner, and you can talk about it later. Or use something you saw on social media. Or say you saw it on social media. Short of them logging into your Facebook, Twitter, what have you, they're not going to know. Like, gee whiz, my friend Lindsay is kind of crazy. She was talking about tossing salad. What are your thoughts on that? She really did. And just try to put yourself out there. Sometimes you're not sure if somebody's even into you at the beginning stages. It sucks, but if you sit around and wait for that person to say they're into you, you might wait a while. One time I waited and they ended up married to not me. So probably should have at least tried, might have gotten rejected, but not me. Any other thoughts on consent? How do you guys ask for consent or know your person is consenting? They explicitly ask. When she grabs your junk, she's... I would call that an enthusiastic yes. In doubt, when she's grabbing your junk, you can be like, are you, did you want to... You don't even have to say it. Just even that, I think, works.
But that's the thing. It's like that's almost a double standard.
Yeah.
If you were to try that on any woman, chances are.
Yeah, and Froggy said if you were to try that on any woman, yeah, if you walk up to a woman and grab her vag, even through her pants, which I guess is her vulva, yeah, you know how hard you're going to get hit?
And it's also a lot for a lot of guys in terms of just putting yourself out there. It's hard to know that how something will be interpreted. One person might interpret, a pass and say, hey, I really think you're hot, maybe we can do something later. Some people consider that harassment. Or another person would consider that the most basis form of just telling them that you're interested. So it's difficult to know how some people will react to the same question.
Yeah, so he said it's difficult to know how people are going to react. So especially, and to be heterosexist, a dude asking a woman. There's a huge difference between a dude asking a woman, hey, do you want to get coffee, and a woman asking a dude. There's some women that are going to take that as creeper. And I hate to do it this way, but especially if it's a stranger. Why is this freaking stranger coming up to me and asking me for coffee? What a weirdo, I don't even know you, blah, blah, blah. He wasn't asking to come in my house. He wasn't asking to come into my pants. is the way I look at it. But yeah, I mean, depending on how you word it. And I have a friend that his behaviors can be taken as creepy. He is taken to trying to friend female friends of mine on Facebook, and he'll send them messages like, "You're really pretty." And I'll be like, okay, you need to do a little bit, add the pretty later. Just be like, oh, hey, I saw you on Holly's friends list. Did we meet at her holiday party or whatever? But he will friend random friends of mine and send the message of, "You're really pretty." If they respond at all, his next message is, "I'd like to take you to dinner." He's also a little socially awkward, and at parties, he's the one that's going to like stand at the corner and kind of look at the girl and go,
Nice.
and he's not a leery guy. He's a very sweet guy. He just doesn't know how. So I can see him like leering on the edge and then walking up and being like, "Hey, you want to get a drink?" And that being taken the wrong way. And that's why it is hard for guys. How...
Well, and especially geeks, because a lot of folks, have anxiety disorders and, have never really felt comfortable being around people in general, let alone asking someone out, as opposed to, a lot of other guys or women who are more socially adapted, let's say. So for conferences like Notacon and a lot of the other hacker conferences or technical times, it's difficult because guys have no experience. And I think, in my opinion, what it kind of boils down to is experience. You need to have been turned down or even told, "Hey, that's creepy." So you get an idea of where you're at. Because it's really hard to self-assess sometimes, if you're that guy.
So you said it's hard to self-assess if you're that guy, especially this kind of culture. A lot of people live behind the computer screen. I mean, there's people I run into at more of like my nerd cons where it's kind of cool because it's like the first time I've seen them in person. And I've known this person for years, and that's why sometimes, I'll meet people and I'll be like, "Oh, this is LJ user, whoever." And it's hard because he said you have to get turned down. You have to have the person tell you, "Hey, you're being really creepy." And rejection is hard. If you think you're going to get rejected, that's super hard. And some of these people don't ever ask somebody out till they're in college, till they're past that. That happens. We all develop at different ages. However, it's knowing if you're being creepy or not. And I think some people, and I hate to speak for like a lot of women, are overly sensitive. Like if a dude asks you for coffee, that doesn't mean he wants to lick your vagina later. Now, is he thinking about it? Possibly, yeah, sure. But there's also this double standard of like, if a lady carries a condom, that means she's a big old slut. But guys always want it. So it's, how do you know? How do you get consent? How do you ask someone out? I'll throw that one out there. Hi, how do you ask somebody out? How do you, come here. How do you ask somebody out on a date? So he says, depends on how many drinks he's had. Let's say one or half, not a lot. What's your name? That's a very appropriate one. Because if somebody is not into you and you ask, what's your name, they're going to pretty much say, leave me alone, fuck off. Is swearing okay? Swearing okay? Oh, good. He doesn't give a shit. Good. They're going to say fuck off, or they're going to be like, they're going to give you a fake name. So if somebody says like Porsche, Cadillac. Is that his real name?
There's like a lady with Starbucks whose name is apparently Gloria.
Awesome.
Yesterday. Yeah.
She's my best friend now. Which, does she have a fly coat, like that red one? But, yeah, I mean, or they're going to give you, like, I used to give people the reject phone number. When I was a bartender. When I was a bartender, yeah, that's what I did. But, yeah, or just to say, oh, it's my friend Jenny's number. But, like, with my friend Lindsay, if somebody tells you I'm a lesbian or I'm in a relationship, that means no. No, not interested. So he said they don't usually get that blunt about things. They're a little more vague. So you mean in how they ask or in how they respond if they're not how they respond. Yeah, and I mean, there's the idea that, you know, because I was always told as a lady, be polite. Like, you shouldn't be mean to somebody. So if somebody asks you out and you're not interested, you shouldn't say no. You should say, oh, thank you for asking. Or my old boss at the one bar said that if I was interested, I should go out with them. But if I wasn't interested, I should say the policy was we weren't allowed to date customers. That happened once. Not to me. Thank God.
So
It's not a straight out rejection. It's at this moment.
So I just want to point out that I think that while these are good things to talk about, like it's important to point out that this puts the onus on the person who is disinterested, which is, you know, at its essential core wrong. I mean, really, no should be enough, and that's really what we're talking about here. Is if everything goes the way it should, and it, you know, if I'm chatting with somebody and I am interested in them and I say, hey, would you like to get coffee? The onus on her shouldn't be, well, that's against policy, or I'm a lesbian. She should be allowed to say no, and that should be enough for me. And if it's not, then that's exactly the problem we're talking about.
If he asks me out for coffee and I start to turn my body away after I say no and try to engage myself in my phone or this person here, that should be a sign. My body is turned away. Not into you, bro.
It shouldn't even really require that. Like the no, a simple no, she shouldn't even have to say, I'm flattered, but no. It should be acceptable for her to say, not interested. I'm cool. Otherwise, we wouldn't, you know, if things actually function like that, we wouldn't have to have the rest of this talk. And it should never, wait, I think it's actually problematic to suggest that she needs to have some sort of a backup plan of like, oh, I'm a lesbian, oh, I'm dating somebody. None of that should be required.
It doesn't work though. I was at the gas station and a guy started talking to me, and I should have just ignored him or pretended he didn't exist. But he wasn't creeping. He was just talking to me about my car at first. Okay, I'm chatting with him at first, and he's like, hey, I'd like to buy you dinner. I said, oh, gosh, I really appreciate that, but no, thank you. And he continued to push, and I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not interested. He pushed again. I said, I'm sorry, but I'm in a relationship. And he said, well, how about you take my number, and if you're ever not completely committed or that's not working out, hit me up. Because that's the kind of woman you want. And I was like, really? You want me to be like, listen, on the DL, don't tell anyone. I had somebody send me a message recently on OkCupid, and their status was in a relationship, and they were looking for friends, short-term partners, just sex or casual sex. But he said, my wife's okay with it, but don't message her. His wife's profile was linked to his. And I was like, really? Really? Just don't tell. Just be your piece on the side, baby, because that's what I really want in my life, is to be somebody's dirty secret. Dirty fun versus dirty secret. Yes. I'm my friend George's wing woman, but he said getting to know somebody first. Don't go straight for the date. And I think that that's the problem, is like anytime that, and not that like, baby, people hit on me all the time. I don't mean to make it sound that way, but as a woman, I'm more likely to get hit on. I mean, that's just the fact of the world. I have a vagina, yay. But when people go straight for the kill of, I want to go out on a date, versus I'd like to get to know you. And here's the deal. Like if anybody said, hey, do you want to just hang out sometime as friends and get coffee? Most likely I would be like, yeah, totally. I'm always up for more friends, especially if we have something in common. Versus somebody that's straight off the bat, and that has happened of, I taught a class recently, and right afterwards, first off, the guy the whole time kept calling me mommy. But, he called another woman in the room mommy as well, so I don't know if like it was just a name for females, but it's really off-putting for somebody to go, mommy, I have a question. First off, I'm nobody's mother, I have dogs. I guess I'm their mommy. But he said mommy, and then at the end he's like, mommy, I would love to take you out. And he kind of did that face. Yeah, like, would you be my mommy? Yeah, I would have been like, no, I changed nobody's diapers. I almost changed somebody's diaper last night. But, no, and like, not yours. The little baby, there was a little boy that his diaper had gotten very dirty and it needed changed. But there was, you change your own diaper. You do it at work, you can do it at home. Bam. But if somebody, like, I appreciate that you said that, because if he had come up to me and said, hey, I really liked the class. Want to get coffee? Well, okay, you know what, dude, it's 1 a.m. No. I had taught a 7 a.m. class and a 7 p.m. class. No. But I might have been like, hey, I would love to when this weekend is not happening. When I have sleep. But he went straight for, I want to buy you dinner. And he had on a wedding ring, and I don't know if that was open or not, but it was also kind of creepy. So don't go straight for the kill, which I think my friend that friends my friends on Facebook does. I want to take you out to dinner. And had he said, you look familiar, I'm looking for new friends that also play Magic, or whatever, I think it would not creep out as many of my friends. Oh. Oh, okay. So there was a woman that said coffee could be a cop-out. I'd rather go straight for dinner. And I do think it can be a short commitment, because trust me, there was times I met people for coffee, and within 10 minutes I was chugging it down, burning my mouth, like, oh, it's empty, bye. But there was also people that I went for coffee with, and then I said, you know what, would you like to get dinner? And then would you like to go to Beer Markt and play pool and whatnot all night? And
but then again, do you really want to be with the person who is that parent? Well, I only went on one date with this, so.
Do they watch the X-Files? Because then the paranoia should be there a little. I like the X-Files. And I think coffee's a little bit too impersonal, and I'd like to do dinner. Did you guys do dinner?
Yes.
How did it go? Wasn't that interesting? No.
You yelled after the first 30 minutes.
He was like, you know what, the appetizer was great, let's not even do the full meal. Like,
No.
I like dessert. Oh, if you do the handshake or the, like, pat hug. Yeah, there was a guy that went straight for my face, and I did that, and he was like, oh, you're going to deny me.
Hell yeah.
I was like, first off, bitch, we went Dutch. Second, even if you had paid for the dinner, it was the best dinner in the world. No. I'll say women dating women, there's a lot more consent and talk about it, but they also tend to rent the U-Haul for the second date. So, sorry, lesbian joke. Okay, at least got 2 to 3 people laugh on that.
Snickers.
There was Snickers. Oh, that's okay. Sorry.
I don't want to miss this slide.
You don't want to miss this one? Okay, so ways to get more involved, and I talked about the backup project. That was in response to the breast thing at 2 cons. That's a really great one. It's open source. It's, I think, pretty fantastic. The con anti-harassment project, that one, they do have a list of cons. Some of them, they list their policies. Some will say no policy. Some will list the policy but say it's not written. That's a great one to get your name on, to have it on there. They also list why they started it, and it's just, I hate to like gush about them, but I don't even know who runs it. I kind of don't want to, because I have such a crush on that person or persons that I'm like, I want to meet you and hug you, and if you're okay with it, and I would like to buy you dinner and coffee if you're okay with it, and I'll send them pizzas. So when in doubt, anonymous pizza. So before we do the questions, and I know we're running now low on time, but there's kids in here after this. So, but just these are.
I figured sex first and then kids was kind of appropriate.
I mean, that's usually how it works. Sex then kids. So, for more help, these are national hotlines, and again, there's not a national harassment hotline. There's workplace ones. So this is sexual assault, domestic violence. Like I said, if you're triggered for any reason, it is something worth talking about, and these things do have lasting consequences. I have a friend that somebody accused them of something very bad, and the consequences were horrible. At one point, I hugged this person, and they started crying, and I thought I did something wrong, and they started crying because they said that they were so afraid people would think they were a bad person. And I mean, like, for me, that was like my stomach lurched. Like, that was like my shit got real moment. Like, seeing how, and it was a male, how affected they were by that. That they were so sure people would reject them and hate them. And this person had been ostracized and had essentially been tarred and feathered and dragged through the mud. And just seeing, I had seen them on social media being dragged through the mud and whatnot. And in a lot of cases, they hadn't specifically named them, but everyone knew who they were talking about. But then to in person see the fact that hugging them made them start to shake and cry. I mean, really, like, it took a lot of my willpower to not start crying. And it really made me realize the full scope of what was happening. On that happy note, any questions? So the people that were here consented to be here.
And the next thing is, even though there's fear of us, we'll talk to our friends and spread it. And it is important. I mean, our policy has always been in the past that, you know, regardless of sex, gender, whatever, you don't harass anybody in any way.
No, in any manner. And the thing is, Notacon is one of the few cons where I've not heard of anyone saying, I felt harassed, I was assaulted, whatnot. There's another con that is more sexually based, but it's still a lot of more geeky people, and they actually have a policy. They make everybody that comes into the place sign the policy, and there's still at least one sexual assault reported each year. So, I mean, you can do, in that situation, I'm like, dude, what more can you do? And you get kicked out if you violate it. So Jody said there was one year where somebody, well after the fact, came to them and mentioned an incident.
It was a flyer. It had some
Well, there was a flyer one year, and there was the mannequins and dildos.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
And it made me uncomfortable, but I watched everyone around me, and no one complained about it, and no one said anything, and we talked about it, and we're like, well, no one's complaining about it, so we're going to leave it there because no one said anything. And then afterwards, we found out that people didn't know who to go to.
They didn't know who to go to. So, and I'm more than happy again to like work with you guys that like if bright shirts, if maybe somebody doesn't want to go to, and I'm not saying this is the reason why, but like I can totally see in the moment not wanting to go to Froggy and Tiger, not wanting to go to the co-organizers. If somebody approaches you and you're not wearing a yellow shirt and they explain they're uncomfortable, you can then go to somebody else. Or you can then step in and be like, you know what, dude, really? And for me, I think it's harder as a woman to like step in and say that to somebody, but there's a time and a place. I mean, I had 2 students in a classroom that, obviously college classroom a little different. The guy was shouting at the woman, and she was crying. And I didn't want to like completely step in, so I just kind of said, hey, you guys better have your freaking homework. And she ended up running and going to the bathroom, and luckily class hadn't started, and I followed her. And I was like, hey, I want to know, are you okay? What can I do? do you want to skip class today? And if we're talking violence, the chances that she's going to go back to the guy were extremely high. I understood that. However, I think planting the seed of, hey, there's phone numbers, there's people that care, there's people that help, that can make a huge difference.
That's what we try to do, and what we hope a lot of other conferences pick up is that we're accessible, you know, and we're understanding, and we're firm on our rules. But just remind everybody that, you know, we may be the organizers, but we're people too.
Yeah, so you said they're organizers, they're people too. They try to be accessible. And I think you guys are pretty accessible.
We do our best.
In many, many ways.
So let people know too that, like you said, you didn't find out about it until way after the fact. You probably let them know too that it doesn't have recording right after, right at the time. You take your time, recollect yourself, and then come to us. Just as long as you let us know sooner or later.
Yeah, I'm glad she found
Yeah.
Yeah, I said, you know, I really wish you would have said something because I felt uncomfortable, but I was watching everybody else, and as an organizer, I decided to let it stand because no one else appeared to be uncomfortable with the situation.
And I mean, I think that's important. No one else appeared to be uncomfortable.
But
You can't speak for everybody else.
Yeah. So I didn't intervene because I appeared to be the only one staff and participant alike that seemed a little uncomfortable. Some other stuff happened later where we stepped in because it was like way over the top. But it was like, well, this situation, I'm going to let it go for a while and see what happens because no one's actively being harassed. It's just a really uncomfortable.
well, plus at a lot of conferences, there's the whole right to free speech versus whatnot. And you know, we're very big pro speak what you want to talk about. We're not going to censor you, but you know, we have to ride that line of what's too much for our company.
When do you hit that line?
So if there's free speech, the comfort line. When does your freedom infringe on my comfort level? Not to say mine, but
No, yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, and I know my comfort level's a lot higher than a lot of other people.
yeah, I was going to say my comfort level, your comfort level are probably going to be
So I guess,
slightly different.
was that something that was in a common area? Because if it's a place where it could be opted out of, I mean, there's obviously people who didn't want to be in this room.
I was going to say common area makes it
So-
more difficult because versus it was the middle, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you couldn't really avoid it, so I figured if people were really bothered, they'd say something. And then nothing came out. So it's like, okay.
And in retrospect, it actually partially caused me to lose my
Yeah, it
job.
caused us some sponsorships and stuff later because we decided to let them have their free speech because people weren't expressing this stuff.
And that's the problem is free speech. I mean, and that's the thing I do really, really appreciate about you guys, the con, as organizers, as individuals, is you guys are so pro free speech. And there's a lot of places that, there's nothing like a few days before a conference, like academic conference, somebody coming to you and saying, I have nothing wrong with, like, at the beginning of a lot of my slides, I have to say, I have no affiliation, I have no sponsorship, which gives me more freedom. But then they'll also say, you can't do X, Y, and Z. Right before I went to teach a sexual assault program at a high school, they pulled myself and the guy I was teaching with, Brian, aside, and they said, we're so glad you guys are here, but you guys can't actually say sex, sexual assault, and they listed all these body parts. Rape, there was a whole lot of words, and we were like, oh my God, we're like, no pun intended, so fucked right now.
Do that right before.
So we got the kids to say it first, and we knew we were never coming back, and we did the best we could without us actually saying it. But I mean, free speech, really? You want us to talk about rape without saying rape? Or body parts? Yeah.
Also, you don't need to have an incident happen to accept a general policy for other comments. You don't have to wait for something to happen. You just go out there and accept or adapt a generic policy to have.
And I fully agree that cons don't need to wait for it. And I think that's why a lot of the problems that are happening right now are happening is because a few people at cons came forward and said, this shit's happening here, and waited and waited and waited for policies. And there's a lot of other cons, if you go to the con anti-harassment page, that it says no policy. And I know for sure one of them, there is no policy, and somebody recently came forward and talked about an incident. And a lot of the people that these are happening to are blogging about it. Now, I'm partial LiveJournal, and there is a lot of LiveJournalers, so, you know, support LiveJournal, owned by Russians. But,
It breaks down the chain of command. There's no policy and something happens. Well, you're just left with
if there's no policy, what do?
you're just left with going to the police, and then the police will step in and start asking the con.
Once you have police, and that's why I listed police, and I was very hesitant. We were very hesitant to put it on the slides because police are ideally the ones we don't want there. Once you bring police, other people are going to see it. People are going to get uncomfortable. Why are the police there? Now the hotel knows you had the police there. You guys have really good security. I feel comfortable with the security people. There's places where they're very large cons and you have no idea who the security is. There's also some larger cons, like I know WizCon started having, as well as BlizzCon, where they actually have basically harassment security. They have their own team, and I was actually really impressed by BlizzCon doing that. I was like, hey. Yeah. I believe this might be their first year doing it, but DragonCon does it now. The people that try and earn the red cards deliberately. Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of... Kick them out.
Yeah.
Kick 'em out.
You want to earn red cards?
How they're doing it, kick 'em out.
Yeah, they're doing it on purpose. Which one? TrotCon?
Yeah, it's like a lot of the people who have the full mascot suits on. I didn't notice it at first, but then halfway through the con, I noticed each one had a spotter, like following them around. I guess there's people who will come up and jump on them, and that's the thing. They're like,
Oh my
jump on
God.
and tackle them sometimes, just like, like start up in the ring and stuff.
I feel bad that he said there's people at the BronyCon that will actually have a spotter behind them because people will come up on them and start doing that. And that's kind of like, and again, not to pick on like the ladies dressing sexy thing, but there's been a lot of ladies at cons that some of the characters are sexy. And there's nothing wrong with either dressing like a sexy character or dressing like a character and making it sexy. But people take it as freedom to think you're easy. And that's why, like, you know, I sometimes do get in trouble when people say I'm a sex educator. I was single. I was at a bar. I told a guy, you know, hey, what do you do for a living? We're just chatting. We're having a nice chat. And I said, I'm a sex educator. And all of a sudden, his hand went very far up my thigh. We'd not physically touched at this point. And he said, so. And he said a couple things to me like, hey, that's really hot. And then he invited me to go down to, this was at the Spitfire, which is a very clean and classy establishment. He asked me to meet him in the bathroom to copulate.
Sounds like a Spitfire,
So
actually.
you thought you said sex worker, not sex teacher.
Yeah.
If I said sex worker and he thought we were going to get it on, he needed to toss some cash on the table or at least pay for that fucking beer I had.
So you needed a sexual education spotter.
I needed a sex ed spotter. And yeah, it's just, that's the same thing is you can dress sexy, you can wear a shirt that says sex geek, you can dress as a brony, you can dress as whoever you want. And that doesn't give anybody the full right to think, I'm going to hump you to be funny, I'm going to hump you to be sexy, I'm going to hump you because you're hot.
I didn't see any of the kids going crazy and humping or anything like that, but the spotters there, I did see it seemed to work out good because people were, they were still giving out hugs and stuff and taking pictures and stuff, but with the spotter there, it seemed like more control.
Yeah, and I feel bad that they have to have a spotter. Like,
Yeah.
you said it gave more control. There was an issue at San Diego Comic-Con a couple years ago where a guy had the free hugs sign. And there's a difference between free hugs or even free hugs, hey, can I hug you? And there was actually a photo, and reading the woman's blog about it, it looked posed, and she said it wasn't. She said no. He said, oh, come on. And she's actually going like this. And her face, like, she looks like freaked out. And he's a bigger guy, and she's smaller, and she's going like this. And I guess even though people said no, he would try and, like, tackle hug them. And he was able to be there the whole weekend. So, and those badges aren't cheap, and they sold out, and I'm kind of annoyed that there could have been cool people there, and here's this motherfucker with the free hugs harassment sign. There's lots of cool people with free hug signs. I like the free shrugs sign. I'm going to start that around here. Like, shrugs 50 cents. Maybe. And there's nothing, I even kind of like the free hugs, but like, have the sign. Maybe ask for people to approach you. But if they say no, or they kind of go like, not really, dude, don't tackle hug. Yeah, the sign is not a pass, and that's just like, if somebody were to stand up in a garter belt and pasties, that's not a free pass. That's not a free pass to grab their ass. That's not a free pass to do whatever. Not cool. I have a friend that's very clothing optional, and the group I hang out with, there's nobody that's just going to grab her cute little butt, and it is cute, just because she's naked. We know she's naked. That's what she does. And that's kind of cool. She's sitting on the couch naked, other people in various stages of undress. I'm usually dressed. And it's a thing. Don't take photos and put it on Facebook, but that's a thing. Any other questions? I do like the brony stuff. I do feel bad that he's got the spotter, though. I feel bad that that has to be a thing.
Yeah, there's people jumping on it, that's a little over the top. But I can see the whole point of having a spotter. They can't see anything of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially if they've got, like, the big ones on. I mean, your field of vision is very limited.
But the cool thing I thought about it was they were so, like, going on about it, you didn't notice that that guy was there at the spotter.
The spotter was able to blend in?
Yeah.
Ah.
Afterwards I noticed, like, oh, this is the same guy again. Like, oh, wait a minute, that guy is the spotter. It's like, the stuff you don't know unless you're actually working volunteer and stuff. You see the inner workings, and all of a sudden you see the backbone. That's the point. But for the common person to come in and not see it, that's how it usually works out the best, because it's there if it needs to be there, but people don't notice it's there. You don't want to have like 30 police here watching over everything. That makes it kind of
Yeah, if there was 30 police here not blending in, that's going to make people nervous, uncomfortable. That's the thing is, I would be like, my dogs aren't here. My dogs were brought home in a police car recently, so I'd be like, they're not here. Go get them.
We were walked out by police at Rubicon Court. Everybody was gathered in a room, and we were escorted out the door of the hotel.
Why?
I know that bottle rockets were involved. I'm not
Oh, bottle rockets. Okay, good. I was going to say, my mom gets very oh my gosh.
giving dogs every other dog.
My mom gets really nervous about me because the one conference I go to every year, the National Sex Ed Conference, we do have a lot of police there, but that's because we've had people coming in trying to fuck with us, not because we personally do anything. Yeah, I mean, and that was really disconcerting that the first year I went solo, and, you know, I told my mom, I was like, I have the conference organizer's cell phone number, and there will be police checking my ID when I get in, and they literally check it to your badge, and you have to have your badge on at all times. If at any time you don't, they can kick you out, and you agree to it when you pay for your badge. And we do have a harassment policy in place there, but it's pretty vague. I mean, it's really... We have something. The rumor mill is that it may be getting better, so maybe they'll hire me. But as time goes on, yeah, because I mean, there's definitely different issues as time goes on. There's different problems that have come up. This most recent year, a close friend of mine actually has a restraining order against somebody. She lives in D.C. The person lives in New York City. They live 10 miles from where the conference was. So she had to give a copy of her restraining order to everyone because this person has literally threatened her life. And they did deal with it in a very good way overall. But the fact that they could come there, and then you get into the whole like cyber stalking thing, because he's never actually met her in person that she knows of. But he was actually finding people that were using the conference hashtag and trying to engage us. So she warned a lot of people ahead of time, if this is this person's known aliases, this is his main one, if he tries to talk with you, just... It got very tricky. And, well, I don't know if that quite falls into this whole policy. I think it is something to kind of, somebody even harassing you on social media.
I don't mean to cut anybody off, but I wanted to say we're actually running over time. And
Sorry.
I really appreciate the folks that came and sat, and before anybody else drifts off, thank you for coming.
Sorry. And we'll
really
be
important.
around to chat, but we'll go off video now. So we love waffles too. Domo love